Everyone in her village believed she was too ugly to ever be loved. They whispered behind her back like snakes in tall grass, mocked her scars with cruel smirks, and called her cursed under their breath when they thought she couldn't hear. Even her own father couldn't stand to look at her. He never celebrated her birthday, never spoke her name with tenderness, never even let kindness touch the tone of his voice when he addressed her. And then, one day, without warning, without ceremony, without even explanation, he gave her away to a man from the Apache tribe. Just handed her over as if she were a cracked bowl, too broken to mend. The villagers called it her fate. They said someone like her didn't deserve better. They muttered that it was mercy, even justice. What they didn't know, what none of them would ever understand, was that the man she was given to didn't see her face. He saw her soul. In a world that had never once cared, he offered her something she had never tasted: dignity. And as the sky turned red that evening, casting long shadows across her path, something within her shifted. This wasn't the end of her story. No, it was the beginning of something no one had dared imagine. In the year 1832, tucked away in a dusty little village folded between harsh hills and silence, there lived a girl named Emily who barely spoke. Her presence was like smoke, always there, always drifting, yet never held. She had lost her mother when she was only 7, and since then, her father treated her like an unwanted remnant of someone he could never forgive himself for losing. He never smiled at her, never embraced her, never looked her in the eyes. To him, she was nothing more than a breathing reminder of pain, too plain, too different, too much of everything he didn't want. While the other girls braided their hair with bright ribbons and laughter, Emily sat alone in corners, pulling her scarf tight around her face like armor, avoiding mirrors like they held monsters, praying that the world would simply forget she existed. Children laughed at her as if she were a walking joke. Adults moved around her like she was a stain they couldn't scrub away. And the heart inside her, still soft, still young, ached for the warmth of something she'd never known. To be held, to be chosen, to be loved, but love never came. Not from the ones who were supposed to give it first. And slowly, piece by piece, she began to believe she didn't deserve it at all. Emily had grown used to being invisible. But nothing could have prepared her for what came next. The drought had been cruel. The fields cracked like broken bone. Animals stopped breeding. Hunger crept into the village like a cold wind that wouldn't leave. Her father, desperate and hard as stone, didn't see a daughter. He saw a transaction. One evening, while the sky bled gold and gray, he rode out to meet an Apache warrior named Takashi. The man had come in peace, bearing offerings of food, medicine, and protection in exchange for safe passage through their land. But Emily's father saw more than trade. He saw opportunity. During the quiet negotiation, he pointed toward a piece of cloth fluttering on the line: Emily's scarf. "Take the girl," he said flatly, like he was bartering a goat. "And the land is yours. No emotion, no explanation, no goodbye, just like that." He gave away his own daughter as if she were a rusted tool left in the rain. Emily, unaware of the deal struck in silence, was called outside. Her chest fluttered, foolish with hope. Maybe, just maybe, her father was finally going to say something kind. But when she stepped out, she saw the stranger, the horses, and the finality in the air. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She'd spent too many years learning that no one would listen anyway. The village gathered like vultures, not to stop it but to watch. Some pitied her, others whispered their usual curses, and a few believed she was being delivered to her death. To them, she had already disappeared. Takashi motioned for her to follow. She looked back once. Her father didn't glance her way. Not even a flicker of regret crossed his face. Her feet felt like they'd turned to stone, but she walked. Every step away from the only place she had ever known felt like falling into darkness. She didn't know who the Apache warrior was, didn't know where she was being taken. All she knew was that the one person who was supposed to protect her had chosen to throw her away. The ride stretched long and silent. The mountains swallowed the sun as the wind whispered fears she couldn't name. What did this man want from her? Would he hurt her? Would he treat her like her father had? Or worse? She stared at the dirt, afraid to lift her eyes. But when they reached the circle of campfires burning low in the coming night, Something unexpected happened. No one pointed at her. No one flinched. The Apache women offered her water without sneering. The children peeked from behind their mothers but didn't laugh, and Takashi didn't drag her forward. He walked beside her, not leading, not following, just beside her. She had been treated like an object, like a shameful secret. But here, among strangers, she didn't feel hated. She felt seen. The pain hadn't vanished. It still burned in the deepest parts of her. But in that moment, a spark flickered. Not hope. Not yet. But something she'd forgotten how to feel, a sense that maybe, just maybe, she mattered. That first night in the Apache camp felt like stepping into someone else's dream. She sat quietly by a small fire, wrapped in a soft blanket that a stranger had placed around her shoulders. Her hands shook, though the air wasn't cold. She braced herself for shouting, for grabbing hands, for cruelty. But none came. Instead, she saw eyes filled with curiosity, not disgust. Women passed by, nodding gently as they offered food. Children watched her but didn't mock her. No one asked why she looked the way she did. No one told her to hide. That Takashi remained silent, a mystery. He didn't lock her away. He didn't demand anything. He simply showed her where she could sleep, gave her water, and said softly, "Rest. No one will harm you here." Then he walked away. Just like that. It wasn't what she expected, and that terrified her. She had braced herself for more pain but found none. She had been prepared for cruelty, not kindness. The next morning, before the first bird sang, she woke with her heart pounding. She thought of running. Old instincts whispered that safety was an illusion. But when she stepped outside, she saw Takashi by the river, carving something into a piece of wood. He didn't beckon her. He didn't speak. He simply looked up and gave a slow nod that said, "You are free to choose." And something shifted in her. The days bled into weeks. Emily began helping in small ways, gathering berries, washing pots, fetching water. The women began to teach her their words. They laughed with her. They touched her hair gently, even braided it, something she had never allowed before. She had hidden her face her whole life. But here, no one asked her to cover it. No one flinched. They looked into her eyes, not past them, and they listened when she spoke. One evening, as stars pierced the black velvet sky, Takashi approached with the wooden carving. He placed it in her hand. It was a small wolf, graceful, fierce. "She walks alone," he said, "but fears nothing." She tried to speak, but her throat tightened. No one had ever given her anything without wanting something in return. That night, wrapped in a blanket beneath unfamiliar stars, Emily cried not from sorrow, but from the tender ache of being seen. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know who she would become in this place so far from where she had started. But she was no longer invisible. She was no longer a burden. She was a girl rediscovering her own soul, not because someone demanded it, but because someone believed in it, held it gently, and never asked her to change. In that silence, something stronger than hope bloomed. Emily began to believe that maybe this life, though not the one she would have chosen, was the one she had always deserved. Each morning the sun rose. She felt it. A quiet shift, a soft awakening. The fear in her eyes dulled. Curiosity took root, and soon, something even rarer, peace. She began greeting the women in their language awkwardly, honestly. They smiled, correcting her, gently. And for the first time, laughter wasn't cruelty, it was connection. She helped in the kitchen, kneeling beside the elder women as they taught her to grind herbs and identify wild roots. They didn't push her aside. They included her. They listened when she asked questions. They nodded at her answers. Her hands, once clenched with shame, now moved with purpose. She even sang, once soft and shy, barely a whisper. No one stopped her. One of the women placed a warm hand on her shoulder and said softly, "Your heart is singing too." That evening, as the fire danced low, she looked into the river's reflection. Her scars were still there. Her face hadn't changed, but her eyes no longer looked hollow. They glowed, with warmth, with a quiet kind of beauty, with dignity. The children gathered near her, asking her to braid their hair the way the other women had shown her. A little girl tucked a tiny flower behind Emily's ear and said, "You're pretty like the stars." Emily felt the tears rise, but she didn't let them fall, not yet. Unsure how to hold that kind of kindness, she kept her distance from Takashi. Not out of mistrust, but because the warmth he offered was something she'd never known how to receive. He never forced conversation, never demanded her attention. He only spoke when needed, and always with the kind of respect that felt like reverence. He taught her patiently how to track small animals through the brush, how to read the shifting moods of the sky, how to move silently across the forest floor without disturbing the world around her. He trusted her, genuinely. Not once did he bring up her past, not once did he mention the trade her father made. It was as if she had always belonged here, as if she had never been anything other than what she was now, a woman slowly relearning her own worth. One afternoon, while gathering firewood along the ridge, Emily tripped. A sharp stone caught her palm, slicing the skin. Blood welled quickly, sliding down her wrist. She sank onto a rock, breathing hard, fighting back the tears. Not from the pain, but from the old familiar fear that crept in like a shadow, the fear of being weak. That's when she heard footsteps, light and measured. Takashi knelt beside her without a word. He took her hand gently in his own, washed the wound with water from his flask, and tore a strip from his own garment to bind it. "The body heals," he said softly, tying the cloth with slow, careful fingers. "But the spirit takes time. Yours is strong." She didn't answer, couldn't. Her throat felt too tight, but her eyes locked with his, not with fear, not even with gratitude, but something deeper. No man had ever looked at her like this. Back in the village, people only ever saw her face. Here, they saw her spirit. The days passed. Her steps grew lighter, her hands steadier. She began to smile openly, without shame. And then one evening, while helping grind wild roots by the fire, an elder woman paused and looked at her with eyes like cracked amber. "You are beautiful, child," she said, her voice soft but sure. "Not because of your face, but because you carry pain like fire and still choose to be gentle." Emily froze. The word beautiful had always been a lie in her world, something used to mock or dismiss. But here, spoken by this woman with earth-worn hands and truth in her voice, it landed like a blessing, and for the first time in her life, she believed it. Seasons shifted quietly across the land, and with each moonrise, something unspoken grew between her and Takashi. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't expected, and it carried no burden of obligation. It was steady, it was honest, it was real. Takashi never once reached for her without purpose. He never touched her to prove anything, never looked at her like she was something to claim. Instead, he listened. He gave her space to be. And at night, when the fire crackled low and the world hushed to listen, she began to share stories she'd locked away inside herself. She told him about her mother, the only one who had ever truly loved her, about the cold meals eaten in silence, about the cruel laughter in the village, the way she learned to become invisible because visibility meant pain. Takashi didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix her. He didn't fill the silence with pity. He just sat beside her, gaze steady, heart wide open. He listened like her voice was sacred. And then, one evening, beneath a sky scattered with stars that hung like whispered promises, he placed something small in her hand, a necklace, worn and simple, made of carved bone and faded beads. "It was my mother's," he said. "She wore it until her final breath. I want you to have it." Emily stared at it, breath caught in her throat. She had never been given anything like this, something personal, something sacred. Her fingers trembled as she held it close to her chest, unable to speak. That night, she lay awake beneath the stars, eyes wide, heart full. She stared up at the heavens and wondered how someone like her, someone once discarded like garbage, could be loved like this. The word love still frightened her. She had seen it twisted into control, used like a weapon. But this felt like something else entirely. There was no pressure, no expectation, no need to be anything other than exactly who she was. And in those quiet firelit nights, she began to fall in love. Not because she was lonely, not because she owed him, but because for the first time, someone saw her. Not her scars, not her silence, not her history, just her. Takashi never said he loved her with grand declarations. He said it in how he walked beside her, never ahead, in how he taught her to ride without fear, in how he paused to hear her opinion before making a decision, in how he made room for her to grow without ever clipping her wings. One afternoon, while watching the river ripple in the wind, Emily whispered, "Do you think I'm still broken?" Takashi looked at her, then pointed gently to the necklace, resting against her collarbone. Even what's broken becomes sacred when carried with love. Her heart ached at the truth wrapped in those words. She had spent her whole life trying to be enough, trying to earn love that never came. But here, in this place of wind and fire, she didn't have to try. She was enough. The fear inside her didn't vanish completely, but it softened, quieted, because real love, the kind that expects nothing and gives everything, had found her months past, like breath through pine needles. And Emily had nearly forgotten the sound of her father's voice. She had built a quiet life among the Apache, one rooted in dignity and peace and a kind of love she had never imagined. But peace, like the seasons, never lingers forever. One morning, as the sun climbed over the distant hills, a plume of dust rose at the edge of the land. A single rider approached, tired, desperate, uninvited. It was her father. His face was hollowed by time and misfortune. His clothes were threadbare. The pride that once puffed his chest now hung limp across his shoulders. The moment she saw him, something old inside her cracked and hardened. The man who had traded her away like livestock now stood before the people he once scorned. Takashi moved to stand between them, silent but protective. But Emily raised a hand. "Let him speak," she said. Her father dismounted awkwardly, as if the ground itself resisted him. He stumbled forward. "Emily," he rasped, his voice brittle, unfamiliar. "I need you." His eyes held no warmth, only hunger. His crops had failed. His trade collapsed. And now the same village that had laughed at her face needed hands to rebuild. "You belong with your family," he said, each word strained as if it cost him something. She stared at him. Family. The man who had never spoken her name with kindness, who had offered her like currency, who watched her leave and never looked back. She searched his face for regret, but there was none, only desperation. "You've changed," he muttered, his gaze moving over her clothes, her posture, the quiet fire in her eyes. "You don't look so strange anymore." The words hit her like stones, clumsy, backhanded, hollow. Even now, he only saw value in what could serve him. Emily looked around, at the tents, the smoke, the people who had no blood ties to her, yet fed her, taught her, protected her, loved her. And then she looked back at the man who had left her with nothing but silence. "I needed you too," she said softly. "But you weren't there." He shifted, trying to speak. She didn't let him. "You didn't come because you love me," she said, voice clear and quiet. "You came because you lost everything else." And for the first time, he looked away. Emily walked toward him, not with anger, with finality. "I'm not the scared little girl you gave away," she said. "I have a life here, a real one." His eyes widened. Panic flickered across his face. "So you're just going to stay with them?" he asked, the word sharp with old prejudice. She repeated it slowly. "Them. They are more family to me than you ever were." He opened his mouth, but nothing came. She turned, walking back toward the camp, toward her home, not as a burden, not as something broken, but as a woman who had found her worth, found her place, found her name. The wind lifted her hair as she passed Takashi, who gave a small nod, knowing she had chosen strength over fear. Behind her, her father faded into the dust, just like the past she no longer carried. Emily had once been discarded like trash, but now she walked like something priceless. Her face still held the scars of another life, but her spirit bore none, because sometimes the family we find is stronger than the one we're born into. And love, real love, never asks to be earned. It only asks to be received.